The name Mozart evokes tales of a genius child prodigy, touring Europe before reaching adolescence and growing up to become a composer. This description not only applies to the famous Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, but also Maria Anna Mozart, his older sister. The only difference is that we will never hear her music, because none of it was saved for future generations. As a byproduct of 18th century society, Maria Anna's music was pushed aside to make room for her marriage. Her story is one facet of a much larger tragedy, the exclusion of women from musical history. We are all victims of this tragedy, only realizing the potential of half our population, thus half the art that could have been created. Maria Anna Mozart, affectionately known as Nannerl, was born in 1751 and began studying music at the age of 8. Her talents as a child prodigy allowed her to tour Europe with her brother. The reaction of her audiences showed she was an exceptional musician and reputable performer. The Correspondance littéraire philosophique et critique, a periodical describing cultural events for the French aristocracy, praised her by saying she plays the harpsichord marvelously and performs the longest and most difficult pieces with impressive precision. Count Karl von Zizendorf wrote in his diary of the Mozart children's performance, "The little child from Salzburg and his sister played the harpsichord. The poor little fellow plays marvelously. He is a child of spirit, lively, charming. His sister's playing is masterly, and he applauded her." It was not a rare event for Nannerl to overshadow her younger brother during performances. As her father wrote to a friend, after her performance, Nannerl received the greatest applause, from both the prince and the duke. However, Nannerl did not triumph over Wolfgang for long. While Wolfgang was able to make a profession for himself as a musician, Nannerl was tragically forced by her parents to abandon her career as a musical artist when she turned 18. The appropriate age for marriage. It was acceptable for a little girl to perform, but continuing her career into womanhood would have ruined Nannerl's reputation by labeling her as a prostitute, and tarnished the Mozart name, which Leopold had devoted his life to crafting into a name of high esteem. Thus, Wolfgang became a professional musician, the pride and joy of his father, and Nannerl did not. But Nannerl did not let this tragedy keep her away from her beloved instrument. She continued to play, and she even composed. Records of her composition exercises show that her father taught her how to write music. It is possible Wolfgang used some of her pieces to learn piano as a child. Martin Jarvis, a professor of music at Charles Darwin University, worked with a team of forensic scientists to analyze the calligraphy of pieces written in the notebook for Nannerl, concluding that Nannerl wrote many of the pieces labeled Anonymous 1. This book was used by young Wolfgang to learn keyboard, meaning that it is likely he used some of her compositions in his education. Nannerl composed into adulthood until her marriage. She sent one of her original pieces to her brother, who wrote back, "I'm amazed to discover that you can compose so delightfully. In a word, your piece is beautiful. You must compose more often." It remains unknown whether she took her brother's advice and wrote more, because no compositions labeled with her name survive today. The story of Nannerl Mozart contains more questions than answers.
Provided, yeah, she was quite capable. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, wow, what could she have done?
But from the few answers that we do have, it seems that she could have made amazing contributions to musical history. "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction," wrote Virginia Woolf. Suzanne Cusick, present-day musician and musicologist, responds that women musicians do not so much need rooms of their own within which we can retreat from the world, as we need ways of being in the world that allow us to engage with the often immobilizing and silencing effects of gender norms. These ways of being in the world not only depend upon a woman's willingness to put on a show of feminine submission and passivity, but also upon the benevolence of supportive fathers, husbands, and brothers. Nannerl had the first of these two ingredients. She was, as her father described, extraordinarily industrious, hard-working, and amazingly attentive. Even more importantly, she was obedient and subservient to her father, never placing her own interests above those of her family. It also helped her cause that the instrument she played was the piano, one of the few instruments considered appropriate for a woman to play because the musician plays seated and with no facial distortions. The cause of her tragedy was in the sexist culture of her time period and the consequential lack of support from her father. Though he encouraged her education in her youth, he did not support a continuation of her musical pursuits in adulthood. The triumph of Maria Anna Mozart is the fact that she was able to perform at all. Though female musicians were not unheard of in the classical period, it was not until 69 years after Nannerl's death that the first women's orchestra was created. It would be another 15 years before a major orchestra hired female instrumentalists. Going beyond her era, Nannerl not only played music, but had her music heard, an experience that few women in her day shared. The tragedy of Maria Anna Mozart goes beyond her own individual story. Her life is just one example of melodies that have been lost because they were written by women. Mariana Martinez, a fellow keyboard virtuoso who lived at the same time as Mozart, enjoyed a successful career writing and performing music during her lifetime. After her death, her legacy was buried with her, and she never got the chance to have her music celebrated like her male counterparts. Augusta Holmes was born several decades after Nannerl's death, yet she faced the same opposition. Her parents were so insistent in their resistance to her musical pursuits that she had to wait until after their deaths to realize her dream. When we limit the involvement of women in classical music, we not only hurt the women themselves, but we hurt our entire culture. We need music to celebrate, to express ourselves, and to communicate on a level of intimacy that goes beyond words. When men are the only people who can create music, we lose half of the celebration, half of the expression, and half of the communication. This tragedy not only affects women of the past, it also impairs aspiring women musicians today. By erasing female musicians from history, we deny present-day women the opportunity to find role models. Role models are people who exemplify a successful way of achieving goals and help establish a sense of self-worth. They are essential in the development of career aspirations, especially for adolescents.
It really comes down to having somebody who looks like you doing that stuff, to be that viable possibility.
When we deny women musicians the opportunity to find a female role model from history, we deny them access to encouragement and damage their ability to seek out a successful path to achieve their goals. For this reason, we cannot leave this tragedy in the past. We need to give women the ability to find role models and see themselves represented in history to build up their self-worth and validate their career aspirations. Clara Schumann once wrote, "I can't be a composer. There haven't been any female composers. Why even try?" If only she knew that there had been centuries of women writing music before her, proving that it can be done. The erasure of women from music history is especially destructive for this reason. By failing to acknowledge female musicians from the past, we fail to encourage female musicians today. Women can be performers, women can be musicians, and women can be composers, as they have been for centuries. The story of Maria Anna Mozart is proof of this. Her talents and accomplishments must not be ignored if we want the voices of women to ring clear in classical music. We must preserve the legacy of Mozart, the female Mozart.